Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to our Zoom Daily with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz to a realistic map of meaning. Lately, we've been going through the beautiful details of the laws of charity and how the community copes with such. And I find this material so interesting because it just sparks ideas of how B'nai Noach can, in fact, make things work, and it gives us a sense of hope. So I'm excited to hear more of what Rabbi Schwartz has got to share. So let's just jump right in. And Shalom, Rabbi Schwartz. We're going to turn the class over to you and look forward to hearing more of what you got to share.
Thank you so much, Dan. Good to be back. And welcome back, everybody. And I'm going to share the screen here. We were up to paragraph 15. I'm going to take off my marker and to place it when we finish. And so now we're going to introduce a new thing. It says, one who travels to a strange city. It's not new. It's like a continuation of the theme. It's an interesting continuation. Do you see the text on the screen? Okay. So one who travels to a strange city using up his available funds during the journey and now does not have provisions to eat is permitted to take from leket shicha peya and the tithe for the poor and to benefit from donations of charity. So you think this can't happen today? My sister just came from Israel. She had changed her flight plans in the middle because she found a better way to go. But the airlines didn't cooperate with her. They took her, but not her baggage. She had to wait 5 days for her baggage. So they had to go out and buy and stop stuff. So like you come, okay, so here she's in Toronto and staying at her daughter's, and then there's go and shop. And today we have access to our funds with credit cards and so on. But in those days, credit cards and so on. So you're out traveling, you take what you think you'll need, you could lose it, or the expenses could have been more than you anticipated, or could have been robbed on the way. It also happened, but you have no money, so now you have nothing to eat. You can't pay your bills. So you can take from, but you're a rich man. When you get home, you'll have lots. It's just right here, you don't have it. So he's saying you can take from. Now listen carefully. Lechet shicha peya. We've had these 3 words before. They refer to the gleanings, the forgotten, and the corner of the field that every year at every harvest in Israel was left for the poor. The gleanings are the sheep, not the sheaves, the stalks of grain that fell out of their hands as they were gathering them up. The shicha was the sheaves, a sheaf or two that they forgot in the field as they were gathering them in. And the peah was a corner that they never touched. They just left that for the poor. Indeterminate size of the corner, but some section of the field. And then there was the tithe of the poor, which was a 10% every 3rd and 6th year. So those were on an annual basis. They were allowed to be there, and also from donations of charity. He says, so this guy has nothing to eat, so he can take from these funds and from the tithe for the poor and from donations of charity. When he returns home, he's not obligated to make restitution, for he was indeed poor during that time, couldn't access his funds. This is comparable to any needy person who later becomes wealthy, who likewise is under no obligation to make restitution. So we were talking last night, somebody asked a question about what about a thief who stole, so he has to make restitution to the person he stole from, and might be able to benefit from charity while he's giving all his money to pay back the bill or make some kind of payment arrangement, however they work it out. But a poor person who, once he takes from charity, if he qualified, so there's no under obligation to make it back. It wasn't a loan, it was a gift. That's what the Torah mandates. This comes from a Mishnah, a section of the Talmud in the Tractate of Peah, which deals specifically with that corner of the field and other issues like that. And it said over there, if a man of property was traveling about from place to place and happened to be in need of taking gleanings, forgotten sheaf, Peah, or the poor man's tithe, he may take them. And on his return home, he must pay for the amount gathered. So said Rabbi Eliezer. Their sages, however, say he was a poor man at that time, and so he need make no restitution. So here you see that often in the Talmud, they disagree. They have different opinions as to how it would work. So there was an opinion that said, yeah, so it's when he gets the money, let him pay it back. But the majority opinion was no, not so, and that's the way we rule. And so that's what the Rambam brings down, that it's the same thing. And Shulchan Aruch concurs too. He writes, one who is normally self-sufficient travels from place to place and uses up his available funds during the journey, so that he now does not have provisions to eat, may take from charity. He doesn't bother listening to the funds. When he returns home, he is not obligated to make restitution, to which the Ramah adds, he is comparable to a needy person who later becomes wealthy, who has no obligation to make restitution. And I found this very interesting, just in the style portion, because you see that the original Talmud that on which Rambam based himself did not discuss the idea of just like when you become wealthy after being poor and you get wealthy, you don't have to pay it back. That was something he added. So that's what the Rambam added, maybe from another section of the Talmud. And then Shulchan Aruch decided he copies his words almost word for word, but he took that out. He took out the idea that he's comparable to a needy person, and the Ramah came along and put it back in. So I'm wondering what was going on. Why the Ramah? It was. I mean, it's it just adds an example. Okay, yeah. My notes are that even though the traveler may in fact be a man of great wealth, the unavailability of that wealth renders him a pauper for the moment. This fits well with our obligation to provide what is lacking to the needy that we just discussed again in depth last night, that at the time that you have a need, so that makes you poor, that eligible for charity. Nevertheless, Rambam apparently bars the traveler from the Kupa and Tamchui funds, even though he would seem to qualify since he now does not have provisions to eat. The reason for this may be because these funds are collected for the poor of the city, a category which does not include this pauper. So this would be exactly consistent with what I resolved last night. And without that, then we'd have a big question, because the guy has nothing to eat. He said this is the case he's describing. The guy ran out of money. He doesn't have food. So and Rambam certainly said he identified which funds he could go to. He's been talking about Kupa and Tamhui as well, but did not mention them in that case. You have to ask yourself, the Rambam, who wrote very clearly and what's the word to use? Exactly, like he was very careful with his words. Succinct, yes. So you can derive that if he said something and not something else, that's what he meant. He meant to exclude the other thing. So especially here, where he did not mention Kuba Tamkui, which he had been mentioning up till now, why did he exclude them? And the answer is, what seemed, as we resolved, is because you can't take from charity funds that were not meant for your situation. And your situation, because you're a traveler, you're taking from funds meant for the poor of the city. That's not you. So you qualify for charity. Right. So you qualify for charity. And if someone wants to give you, that's fine. You can take, and they can give you, and they can take it off their charity fund and so on. But the funds that are already been given for a particular reason for the poor of the city, that's not for you. So you can't go there. Whereas the annual amounts that he was talking about, that was never designated for the people of one place. It was whoever wants to come can come and take it. You don't give it. So that's why it works out perfectly. Okay, we're going to paragraph 16. One who owns houses, fields, and vineyards, which, if he sells them during the rainy season, will have to sell them very cheaply. But if he sells them during the summer, will be able to sell them for their full value, is not obligated to sell them poorly. Instead, we feed him from the tithe for the poor up to half their value, so that he need not press himself to sell them in the off season. Yes. So and it's very timely too because I was consulting with somebody who asked me for advice, single woman who owns a house and it's kind of beat up. It's very run down, and it's not the right place for her, and so on. And today, she any house in Toronto is worth a lot of money, but the market was down, and she wanted
Right.
to sell, and she wasn't able to find a buyer for for what she wanted to get, and that
When the market turned soft, yeah.
right. So, what should she do? And so on. So we were discussing exactly this situation. Are we going to force you to sell your house now when the prices are updated? So now, thank God, I think the prices have come back a little, and
Recovered, yeah.
yeah, she's going to be able to do something hopefully. But it was an interesting case. So just get the two. Okay. So that's one, and now we have another paragraph. Not where you got you have to sell, but let's say and it's rainy season. The one condition is that just the season's off. It's not a bad time. It's not a good time to sell. Here's another situation: if all others are able to sell at normal prices, but he is unable to find a buyer except at below market values, more like first situation, because he's hard pressed for money. That's another, she's also in that situation because someone could look, well, we can press her. She's a single woman. She doesn't know this, that. But so we do not obligate him to sell. He's or is he sitting on a nice piece of property? It's worth money. He doesn't have food. So he said, well, sell the property and you'll have what to eat. And what I might sell it now, I won't get what it's really worth.
So, Rabbi, if he was forced to sell, that in a sense, that would be a degree of theft, wouldn't it?
You could say it, but so this is what the ruling is that we have an obligation to feed him from charity. He's one of us. This person is part of our community, and they're hard pressed right now because of the situation. So we have to make our charity funds available to this person, even though they're sitting on a piece of property, and not just force them to sell. So let's finish the paragraph. Instead, he can continue to eat from the tithe of the poor until such time that the marketplace knows that he's not hard pressed and he can therefore sell at full value. So it's not the season, it's him. So there's two conditions. One is that the market might be down, so we don't force a person to sell in a bad market. And the other thing is we don't force a person to sell when people are trying to take advantage of him. So and in both cases, we're supporting that economic hardship. That's that he himself could resolve, but at a discount. Yeah, well, at a discounted value. Yeah. So um, that's and they'll run into situations like this. But notice also again that he didn't say you can take from the kupa or the tamchui. He can continue from the tithe of the poor. It's a particular fund until such time. Okay. Bava Kama, this is in Torts. An owner of houses, fields, and vineyards who cannot find a purchaser is considered needy and may be given the tithe for the poor up to half the value of his estate. Now, the master discussed the circumstances under which this permission could apply. If property in general, and his included, dropped in value, why not grant him even the value of more than half of his estate's value, since the depreciation is general? If, on the other hand, property in general appreciated, but his, on account of his going about looking here and there for ready money, fell in price, why give him anything at all? And the master thereupon said, no, the above law is applicable to cases where in the month of Nisan, which is springtime, property has a higher value, whereas in the month of Tishri, which is fall season, it has a lower value. It's the rainy season. people in general wait until Nisan, until the spring, and then sell. Whereas this particular proprietor, being in great need of ready money, finds himself compelled to sell in Tishrei, rainy season, at the existing low price. He is therefore granted half because it is in the nature of property to drop in value up to a half, but is not in its nature to drop more than that. That's a little mysterious as to what that means. So we're going to read a little further. But what does he mean about that half value? I'm not quite following that. So
Market. I bet the market at the time that was written, it was the case. And
why half value? What difference does it make whether it's up to half value or more or so on? I assume that that's what happened. That it would drop to half the value. That must have been the case. But so let's say went below that. What would be then? So let's see. Okay. So one who has land holdings, which if he sells them during the rainy season, will have to sell them very cheaply, or will he sell? This is the Shulchan Aruch. So it's repeated. One who has land holdings, which if he sells them during the rainy season, will have to sell them very cheaply, but if he sells them during the summer, will be able to sell them for their full value, is not obligated to sell them poorly. Instead, we feed him from the tithe for the poor up to half their value, so that he need not press himself to sell them in the off season. To which the Ramah adds, some say that we only feed him until he is able to sell them for half their value. And next, if all others are able to sell at very good prices, but he is unable to find a buyer except at below market value because he is hard pressed for money and confused, we do not obligate him to sell. Instead, he can continue to eat from the tithe of the poor until such time that he can sell it for its worth, because all know that he is not hard pressed to sell. So that once people realize he's not hard pressed to sell anymore, so then he will be able to get what is due him. Okay. So my notes are like this. The cases in these two paragraphs are similar to the case in the preceding paragraph of a traveling rich man who is temporarily impoverished by his inability to avail himself of his wealth. In other words, we've just had two paragraphs, two different guys, not travelers, just the economic situation was one or the other, and he's got to sell for less than its normal value. So that's like the traveling rich man who was temporarily impoverished by his inability to avail himself of his wealth. Here, too, the underlying wealth of the man is considered unavailable. He owns the property, but he can't access the full value. In paragraph 16, because of in paragraph 16, because of general conditions which will correct themselves in the foreseeable future, in paragraph 17, because of circumstances particular to this man, circumstances which we anticipate will be corrected through temporary financial support. So that's what's going on. Both cases must be referring to property in which the owner is not resident. Since paragraph 14 has already taught that a pauper is not required to sell his home before receiving public aid. Right? Remember, we said you don't have to sell your home. So he's got this land. So we're talking about property that's not his home. It's like a field or an extra, cottage maybe or something. Moreover, the property must be worth more than 200 zuz, even at its distressed value, because otherwise its sale would still leave the owner fully entitled to collect from the tithe of the poor, and the principle expounded here would be an unwarranted repetition of earlier statements. So we have to be talking about something worth more than 200 zuz, because otherwise, there's nothing to discuss. We already discussed it. However, if the owner can immediately avail himself of at least 200 zuz, different from the traveler who cannot, why indeed can he still collect from the tithe of the poor? presumably, because I'm saying he can, since he could get at least 200 zoos, we've already established the rule that if you get 200 zoos, then can't qualify for the tithe of the poor. So it may be that this question leads to an extension of the concept of personal assets discussed earlier. Uh, I'm not sure. I didn't review this. Okay, I'll read this, but I think I changed this. This was how I developed it originally. So sorry, but I'm in the middle of revising a much earlier analysis. Personal assets. So I'll continue here. Personal assets may encompass the financial status to which one could normally aspire. That is, one's self-confidence concept of financial worth may be a personal asset. In other words, like who do you look at yourself as a certain type? You're middle class, you're a middle class guy, or you're a lower class, or you're a higher class, upper class. So that's part of who you are. So by forcing a sale at distressed prices, we would be impairing this personal asset. However, requiring one to support himself from his liquid assets is a normal and expected usage of such assets, which could not be viewed as a denial of personal assets. Accordingly, when the price is distressed because of the season, we only allow participation of the tithe of the poor up to 1/2 of the normal value of the property, since it's not expected that the price will have fallen more than that. In this way, should it still become necessary to sell the property for half its normal value, the owner's original financial status will not have been any further diminished than it would have been anyway. His self-concept of financial worth will not have been adversely affected by these limitations. There's something happening here. So it's going to be that he wants, the whole marketplace changed, and he's never going to get the price. So then, what I was thinking when I wrote this is there could be a situation where, prices just dropped and it's not coming back. I've had that happen to me. It took 10, 20, 10, 15 years for the prices to come back up to where I originally bought. It was a nice decade or two. So, when that happens, it's not a question of seasons. They go, there was a fall in the market. Sure, everything eventually would come up, but I think everybody would agree that if, normally, if there's an annual cycle and this is a bad cycle and this is a good cycle, so okay, so we just got to wait it out for the year. But when there could also happen that just it was a bubble. You bought in a bubble. You bought it at a super high price that wasn't justified, and now you just have to go back to where it really should have been all along. Maybe eventually it'll get back there. Maybe it does with real estate. You may have to wait a lifetime for that. So that's a different thing. And I may have been thinking about that when I wrote this difference. And so, about a forced sale, well, if your property just has suffered this bubble blow up, then you've lost the value. Okay, so that's all I said there. So what I was trying to deal with was this idea of the half value and when you sell it and so on, and in which case can you go to charity, in which case not. So I have to. I'm not sure I've done a perfect job there. I'll be going over that. But I'll continue here. Paragraph 18. A poor person for whom they have collected to fulfill his needs, and the collection has exceeded his needs, may take the excess for himself. The excess of a collection made for the poor in general should be set aside for the poor. The excess of a collection made for captives should be used for captives. The excess of a collection made for a particular captive should go to that captive. The excess of a collection made for the dead should be used for the dead. The excess of a collection made for a particular deceased should go to the heirs of the deceased. So, in other words, the whole, again, this is consistent with what I said the other night, is that you have to use the funds for the purpose for which they were intended or set aside. So in this case where you collected, you set out public letter, a call to arms, and said we got this need, we got money for something, and people respond, and they respond more than you thought, or generously, and now you've got more than you need. So what do? Do you give it back? No, they gave it, and they achieved the mitzvah in giving it, and they can deduct it from their budget and so on. But what do you do with the excess? So you have to give it to the people that they collected it, and it's called a charity donation. And that's the way it works. This is reminiscent of the first time this happened was recorded in the Torah when they first made a collection for the tabernacle for the Mishkan, the portable temple that they built in the wilderness. So it says there that the people responded very generously, and the leaders came to Moshe and said, "We got more than we need here." So they sent out a call saying, "Stop! Don't stop giving, because we don't know what to do with the excess, or we can't use the excess." Okay, so we're going to read. This is shekalim. Shekalim is refers to the shekels. There is one of the instructions in the Torah for the people living in Israel is to donate. It was like a head tax. Every person of age of majority had to contribute. I think it was shekel and a half, twice a year to the to the temple treasury, and so there's a tractate discussing this, and so discussing donations. So it said over there, the surplus of money raised for the poor must be used for other poor. The surplus of money raised for the particular poor person must be given to that poor person. The surplus of money raised for the ransom of captives must be used for the ransom of other captives. Yeah, I meant to. In other words, if there was a particular, not specific guys, but we have a situation here where we have to have a fund ready for people who are captured. It's not a particular person, or generally for poor people. So then there's that fund, and if they have more than they anticipated for that fund, so they put it into that fund. They just keep it for that when the need arises, but they have to keep it for that purpose. The surplus of money raised for the ransom of a particular captive must be given to that captive. The surplus of money raised for the burial of the dead must be used for the burial of the other dead. The surplus of money raised for the burial of a particular dead must be given to his heirs. But Meir says the surplus of money raised for the burial of a particular dead person must be laid aside until Elijah comes. Okay, now I don't know if I got a note on that, but there's a Jewish tradition that Elijah, who never seemed to have died because he ascended heaven in a fiery chariot, so it's considered like he's still bumping around. Tradition that he comes and pays a visit to every circumcision ceremony. Is one of the things that he does. He comes every Pesach night to the feast at the night of Pesach to every home. So this is the original Santa Claus idea, I guess, that he comes around. And so it's not completely out of nowhere that idea arose. But he's also, when he comes, he's going to be a precursor to the Messiah, to Mashiach. And what his job then will be is to teach the Torah and to resolve these differences, because you'll have there's a lot of, as we saw, disputes between the sages. Should the rule of law go this way or go that way? Well, we have a method of resolving that, but we're never quite sure. It's still open for debate. We still, discuss it and explain the thinking behind each side. We have to have a course of action, so we have rules for which course of action we choose. But the matter is still in dispute. And when Elijah comes, he'll tell us how it really should have gone, and that'll be fine. And particularly, there will be there's a whole series of situations of money we don't know who really belongs to, and the court would just put it into a trust fund. They wouldn't be able to give it to anybody. And so you say, when he comes, he'll tell you who to give the money to. So practically speaking, it's not a good idea to get a dispute. It's better if you can make a compromise and decide, okay, we'll agree to split the money this way or that way. It's always better. But failing to do that, we have this rule. Rabbi Nathan says the surplus of money raised for the burial of a particular dead person must be used for building a monument for him over his grave. That's an interesting uh, twist. Not to his heirs, and not to be put into storage until he comes back to life, I guess, or until we decide what to do with it, but to use it for his needs, which would be a monument of his burial site, a tombstone. Okay, I think we'll stop here because it's 10 o'clock. And I got work to do over the weekend. We'll see you guys next Sunday.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting, Rabbi, to see how the justness of what the rabbis are trying to put forth in this. Yeah, and I think you remember at the beginning of this, I had a lot of concern or questions about people that take advantage, and you said, oh, we'll get there, and it's been a while to get there, but it's joy to be able to see how they balance it out in the end it should go where it's intended, and I think that's always the right thing. If somebody gives to a cause, make sure it goes to the cause. No misappropriation.
Right.
That was a little bit of a twist on the land, and support the fellow up to half. But then again, too, we live in this hyperbolized generation where property values are so inflated. I mean, if you just go back 150 years, I mean, a couple $100 would buy you farmland, right? Like 150 years ago, you could buy land for $100.
Well, yeah, but see, but it is a true value, because the thing is that we live in a land that's supposed to be stable, and where where people can find refuge and be treated fairly, and not have to pay ransom money to the government and so on. So our land is considered by rich people in other lands as very valuable, and so they come here and they'll buy land for they send their kids here to settle down, and so they're preparing for their future, and that drives the prices up. They're willing to pay a high price because they appreciate how the stability of our system as opposed to their own, and there's a lot of that going on, and that's what drives the prices up. So a lot of Chinese money coming in because they want to get out stuff like that. There's people when they freed up the economy somewhat. So some people make big fortunes.
And out here where I am, Rabbi, you see people listing houses for sale a lot, and the reality is, if you inquire with a lot of the houses, they're only for sale if they get the price they want.
Of course, yeah. They just want to cash in,
yeah.
So that's how the economy works.
Yeah, very interesting, and I appreciate the Torah insights on the matter. It really is helpful for sure. So we're going to sign out for today, but we will be back more with Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz for Zoom Daily on Sunday. B'ezrat Hashem, and we wish you all a Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. So we'll see you Sunday. Until then, bye for now, everybody.
Goodbye.